This is the High Sensory Mothers podcast with Karen Hunt, where we discuss the ups and downs of motherhood for purpose-driven women with high sensory intelligence. Hi, and welcome to episode 6 of the High Sensory Mothers podcast. This episode is going to be a little different from my previous ones. I'm going to be talking about the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I've come across this book online and I thought it was definitely one I wanted to read. So I put it on my Christmas list last year for my daughters, and it was quite funny, but both of them ended up buying me a copy. So I actually have 2 copies, and I wonder how significant that is. It's taken me a little while to get to it. As I record this, it's now April 2025. So I've had it since Christmas last year, but I do have a lot of books on my bookshelf to read. I have been reading it over the last few weeks, and I'm having to read it in relatively small doses. Sometimes I can read more at a time than others, but it's a very deep and authentic read, which isn't super common, I would say, at the moment. There's so much quick, easy, surface level information out there. And this book deserves a little more time to absorb the messages and to reflect on the content. And so I felt very drawn to discussing my reflections and picking out some parts of the book that I feel could resonate for you. Glennon is clearly an HSP, and she's also very successful as an author, and she has a nonprofit too, which is really making a difference. Let's have a look at a few parts of the book that I'd like to draw to your attention. I suspect you may be able to relate to this quote. This is on page 91, beginning the section called Ghosts. She puts a quote in there from her previous book, and this is what she says. I was born a little broken with an extra dose of sensitivity. Some horseshit I wrote about myself in my first memoir. So, in my opinion, she's identifying the pervading sense of wrongness that HSPs often feel growing up. And it really does stay with us until we address it, confront it, look at it, question it, examine it. Is it true? We need to ask ourselves, is it actually really true? I think many of us growing up believe that it's true, but is it actually the society and the expectations that we have around us that make it appear to be true? If things were different in the world, and that might not be very practical, but as a thought experiment, can you just imagine a utopia and what that would look like? And then, would it be a problem for us to be sensitive or not? If not, is it then possible that there's nothing wrong with us being sensitive, but our society hasn't really caught up with the benefits of embracing this sensitivity? And if you did grow up believing that your sensitivity was a problem, what would happen if you surround yourself with people who see it as being a positive thing? What if you had an environment or a peer group of people who are HSP, or even if they're not HSP, they appreciate and value your sensitivity? What would that look like? How would that impact you? What would that do for you? How would you change how you think about yourself, the work that you do, how you treat yourself and others? I'd really love you to reflect on that. It's my belief that when you are surrounded, and it doesn't mean that you have to be totally surrounded with HSPs or people who are really supportive, but if you are struggling with your sensitivity, by creating a supportive environment for yourself, you will find that inner strength to stand up for your sensitivity and therefore stand up for yourself. If you don't know anybody who is HSP or happy about being an HSP, perhaps, then do reach out to me and we can have a conversation. But there are a lot of people out there, and you may be surprised if you suspect someone might be HSP. Perhaps have that conversation. Perhaps you can support each other in your acceptance and your growth in this area. So clearly, it's important to accept this fundamental part of yourself because, after all, as we know, it is a genetic trait. You are born with your sensitivity, so there's no way of getting rid of it. All you can do is either bemoan yourself for being afflicted by it, or try and suppress it, or ignore it, or distract yourself with unhealthy ways of coping in the world that exists that doesn't support it. Or you can look at supporting yourself and thriving because of it. And that's what obviously I would encourage you to do. So moving on, the next part in the book that I'd like to bring up is the pages from 114 to 117. Here, Glennon talks about a friend that she went to college with called Erica, who was a born artist but studied business because that was her family's expectations. And so it's quite sad, this story, because essentially Erica denied her true nature, her purpose, in order to adhere to other people's expectations. And I think it's very common for women to do that, and also HSPs to do that. Essentially, we're suppressing half the population by going along with this, which, if we want to be here to help make the world a better place, doesn't actually achieve that, because how can humanity be strong if half of us are not able to live our lives authentically and true to ourselves? Culturally, most places, I would say around the world, women have learnt that if we suppress ourselves in service to others, then we are admired for that. We're praised for that. But at what cost? Glennon asks some questions here on page 114. Why do women find it honourable to dismiss ourselves? Why do we decide that denying our longing is the responsible thing to do? Why do we believe that what will thrill and fulfill us will hurt our people? Why do we mistrust ourselves so completely? She does then go on to talk about all the different reasons why our culture was built the way it is and why women tend to be in that position. And one of the things that I've got from her book, and I have to say I do relate to this too, is as we get older, things can shift quite considerably. And certainly when you're a mother with younger children, it does seem to be more difficult to do this. And I feel like that's why, for me, it's important to get these messages out there to you if you are younger, because I can look back personally and see the ways that I denied myself, the ways I put others before me. And fundamentally, I've learned that it backfires. It really doesn't work. It might work in the moment, but it has consequences, because it's not just about meeting your child or your partner's needs in the moment. You're teaching them how to treat you and also how to treat others. If you have sons, it could be how to treat other women. If you have daughters, you're modeling how to be a woman. And I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I had learnt these lessons earlier. There's nothing I can do to change that for myself, but what I can do is to speak to this for your benefit. And now for my children's benefits too. As they're getting older, potentially they become mothers. I am going to have to teach them because I didn't model everything that I now see would have been beneficial for them to model. So it's a matter of calling these behaviors out and teaching them. And on this final page on 117, she talks about the fact that we are only tied to ourselves our entire lives. We only have ourselves to trust and to love ultimately. And this self-love is so, so important because when we do love ourselves, we are able to love others and to give more to others because it comes from a genuine place of care and purpose and connection and belonging. And it's real, it's authentic, and it's not stealing from us and our energy. It's an act of giving. She says, I'll disappoint everyone else before I'll disappoint myself. I'll forsake all others before I'll forsake myself. Me and myself, we are till death do us part. Let's move on to the section called Eyes, which is page 127 until 129. She's describing this experience of looking at herself in the mirror, not in the way that we often look in the mirror as a way of checking our hair, our skin, but actually truly looking deeply into our own eyes. And I've had a similar experience. She described looking into a mirror and looking very deeply into her own eyes and really seeing yourself. And I remember doing this myself. It was around the time I was getting divorced and I was home alone. I think my children were with their father. And I remember sitting in front of the mirror and just looking at myself and realizing I hadn't actually done that in a very long time. I do recall doing it as a child as I was coming into conscious awareness of myself. But I did this as a grown woman and it was frightening. I found it quite scary. And I think because I was seeing so much pain, I was seeing all the fear, the loneliness, this wretchedness that was coming up to be devoured by the light. I saw myself and I cried. I sobbed. I kind of screamed and wailed even because all this deep fear and pain, all these buried feelings were coming up. They were coming up to the surface to be acknowledged. It was intense, and afterwards I was spent, but I was calm and I was really compassionate to myself. I think I was experiencing the grief of living a life where I'd put myself last so that I could be what I thought was a great mother and wife, a responsible adult, an employee, have a thriving business. But, my marriage ended. My children were struggling. Finances were tight. And I felt grey and lifeless. Clearly, my strategy of burying myself and ignoring the pain, the foundation of which I was built on. It just didn't work. It wasn't an effective way to live. So as I was reading these pages, I was reminded of that time. And Glennon talks about this knowing within herself that rises. And she said, "My children do not need me to save them. My children need to watch me save myself." She made a decision at that time to quit using her children as an excuse to not be brave, because she was contemplating divorce. And she'd instead decided that she would actually use them as the reason for going ahead and making that big life decision, that change, because she needed them to see her as the model. I would love for you to reflect upon where in your life you are not honouring what you know to be true. And are you using something as a distraction or as an excuse to ignore that knowing? Perhaps you could sit in front of the mirror and stare deeply into your own eyes and perhaps journal on what comes up for you. Continuing on with this theme, on page 268, Glennon says, "Again and again women ask me, how do I find my purpose? How do I find my people? My best advice? When heartbreak rings, answer the door." Again, I really resonate with this because during my coaching journey with Willow McIntosh of Illuminance and the founder of the High Sensory Method, I discovered my purpose in serving other high sensory mothers through this work. Originally, I wanted to just focus on marketing coaching, which I'd done before, but there was this pain associated with my motherhood journey, and it kept getting prodded. And I kept not wanting to go there. I learnt that one of my methods of feeling what's important and what truth is this emotional wave that comes up from around my solar plexus up to my eyes, which often means that I get tears in my eyes. And there's this real physical sensation in my body that I feel. And it kept coming up with my motherhood journey and my belief in how important mothers are and how we're not respected enough, in my opinion, how we're not supported enough. And when I was looking back over my journey as an entrepreneur and as a mother, it became clear to me that this is what I'm here to do, where I'm able to make a difference in the world. The more I delved into the pain of that, the more I was able to transmute it. And if I can help you, just one person, then at least the pain that I went through feels like it's not wasted. It was worthwhile. And she continues on pages 271 to 2, where she says, "Grief is a cocoon from which we emerge new." And of course, we can't avoid experiencing pain or grief. And we do feel it deeply, so it is particularly difficult and challenging for us. But we can use it to transform ourselves into something new and beautiful, just like the caterpillar does with the butterfly. She also says, "When grief rings, surrender. There is nothing else to do. The delivery is utter transformation." And I so agree with that. If we can let go of the fear of the pain, because it is inevitable, it really helps us move in a more gracious way through the difficulties in our life. And it doesn't just have to be difficulties. For me, I remember when I was pregnant with my first child and I went to the hospital, I gave birth, and when I was coming home, I really didn't want to put on my maternity clothes. I felt like I'd gone through a complete transformation. I was now a mother. I wasn't just a pregnant woman. I was a mother. And my clothes just weren't right. They weren't a good fit for me. None of my clothes were right. My maternity clothes felt wrong. My pre-pregnancy clothes felt wrong. I needed to have new mother clothes. And I just felt like there was this secret that no one had told me, that being pregnant meant having a baby, and it was all about the baby. There was nothing about me being a mother. Suddenly I was just an appendix to my child. I was just their caregiver. And that really was the beginning for me of how important motherhood was. This is such a rich book. It's so truthful. And I would encourage you to read the book if you haven't already, and to journal and reflect on whatever feels most pertinent to you at the moment. So I've picked out a few of my favourite parts of the book. We talked a bit about feeling broken as a sensitive person and how we need to surround ourselves with a positive environment to move past this incorrect assessment of ourselves. And how it is so important for us to connect with our inner knowing and to pursue our purpose, because we are modelling our behaviour to our children, and so looking after them doesn't mean abandoning ourselves. And when you do feel the pain and the grief, to sit with it and to allow it to transform and transmute it into this new beautiful potential life that you have. If you've read the book, I would love to hear your insights, so do leave a comment. If you've yet to read the book, then I encourage you to do so. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. Thanks so much. Bye for now. Did you like this episode? Then before heading to the next one, please subscribe and leave a review on Apple so this podcast can get in front of more people. If you've already done that, thank you so much. See you on the next episode.